At the height of his power, this man escaped a maximum security prison not once, but twice. The second time, through a mile-long tunnel dug directly beneath his own shower. He built a smuggling empire that, according to U.S. prosecutors, moved more cocaine into the United States than any other trafficker in modern history. And in the end, he wasn't captured by the world's most sophisticated intelligence agencies. He was undone by the people closest to him. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how it happened.
This is the story of Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán and why his rise and fall changed the global drug trade forever. Most people know El Chapo as a pop culture figure, the subject of a Netflix series, a meme, a nickname that means shorty in Spanish.
But the pop culture version leaves out the scale of what he actually built. According to testimony at his 2019 trial in Brooklyn Federal Court, the Sinaloa Cartel, under Guzmán's leadership, trafficked an estimated 200 tons of cocaine into the United States, along with vast quantities of heroin, methamphetamine, and marijuana, generating billions of dollars in revenue over roughly 3 decades. His case is historically significant, not just because of the money involved, but because it forced U.S. and Mexican law enforcement to fundamentally rethink how they pursue high-value targets. And it exposed, in open court, the depth of corruption that allowed a fugitive of his profile to operate for years in plain sight. Guzmán was born in 1957 in La Tuna, a small, impoverished settlement in the mountains of Sinaloa, Mexico, a region where poppy and marijuana cultivation had been part of the local economy for generations.
By most accounts, including later journalistic investigations and his own trial testimony, his father was a cattle rancher involved in the marijuana trade, and Guzmán grew up with limited formal education in an environment where the drug trade wasn't an anomaly. It was one of the only viable paths to income. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, Sinaloa was already the heartland of Mexican drug trafficking, and a young Guzmán entered the business working under Héctor El Güero Palma, and later under legendary trafficker Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, sometimes called the godfather of the modern Mexican drug trade. This was the moment that mattered, not a dramatic turning point, but a slow absorption into a system that was already there, waiting for anyone willing to take the risk. But this is where things get interesting. By the mid-1980s, Felix Gallardo's organization had essentially functioned as a single dominant cartel, controlling most of Mexico's trafficking routes into the U.S. When Felix Gallardo was arrested in 1989, he reportedly divided his territory among his top lieutenants, including Guzmán, creating what would become several of the cartels that dominate headlines today.
Guzmán took his share, and through a mix of ambition and brutal efficiency, began expanding it into what the world now knows as the Sinaloa Cartel. What made Guzmán stand out wasn't just violence. Every major trafficker used violence. What made him different was logistics. According to court testimony and reporting from outlets including the Associated Press and the New York Times, Guzmán's organization pioneered the use of underground tunnels beneath the U.S.-Mexico border to move product, some of them engineered with ventilation and rail systems.
He also became known for using intercepted business shipments and legitimate trade routes to disguise loads, and for building an intelligence network that reportedly included corrupt police officials on both sides of the border. Each innovation reduced risk and increased volume, and each one made him wealthier and harder to catch. At this point, one decision would define everything that came after. In June 1993, Guzmán was arrested in Guatemala and extradited to Mexico, where he was sentenced to over 20 years in prison. Most people assumed that was the end of his story.
It wasn't. According to Mexican government investigations that followed, Guzmán continued to run significant parts of his operation from inside Puente Grande prison, allegedly bribing guards and officials. Then, in January 2001, he escaped, reportedly hidden in a laundry cart, according to the official account, later disputed by some investigators who suggested he may have simply walked out with the help of paid staff. Either way, the effect was the same.
Mexico's most wanted trafficker was free, and the legend of El Chapo as an uncatchable figure began to take hold. This is the most shocking part of the story, and the part most people don't fully understand. For 13 years after that escape, Guzmán expanded the Sinaloa Cartel into what U.S. prosecutors would later describe as the most powerful drug trafficking organization the DEA had ever encountered, operating in more than 50 countries. He was named by Forbes magazine to its list of the world's billionaires multiple times between 2009 and 2011, with estimated wealth in the billions of dollars. A placement so unusual for an active fugitive that it became a symbol of how far law enforcement's reach had fallen short.
He was finally recaptured in February 2014 in Mazatlan, only to escape again in July 2015 through what remains one of the most audacious prison breaks in modern history, a mile-long tunnel complete with lighting and ventilation that opened directly beneath the shower stall of his cell at the Altiplano maximum security prison. Mexican officials later confirmed the tunnel took months to construct and had gone completely undetected despite the facility's security measures. For a period of time, the world's most wanted man was once again simply gone. The investigation that eventually ended his career permanently didn't come from a single raid or a lucky break. It came from years of accumulated pressure, and ultimately from betrayal within his own circle. U.S. and Mexican authorities, working through the DEA and Mexican Marines, tracked Guzmán using a combination of surveillance and cooperating witnesses, including associates who had once been loyal to him. He was recaptured in January 2016 in Los Mochis, Sinaloa, following a violent confrontation, and was extradited to the United States in January 2017, a move Mexican officials had resisted for years out of concern he would simply escape again. His trial in Brooklyn in 2018 and 2019 became one of the most closely watched criminal proceedings in American history. Over the course of 11 weeks, prosecutors called dozens of witnesses, including former high-ranking members of his own organization, who testified against him in exchange for reduced sentences.
Their testimony detailed not just the scale of the trafficking operation, but allegations of extreme violence used to maintain control, and claims, never proven in court but widely reported, that Guzmán had paid bribes reaching the highest levels of Mexican law enforcement, and, according to one witness, even a former Mexican president, an allegation that president has denied and which remains unproven.
In February 2019, a jury convicted Guzmán on all counts, including engaging in a continuing criminal enterprise. In July 2019, he was sentenced to life in prison, plus 30 years, and is currently incarcerated at ADX Florence, the federal government's highest security prison in Colorado. Here are some of the details from this case that most people never hear. The DEA investigation that helped bring him down spanned more than a decade and involved law enforcement agencies across multiple continents. His trial jury had to be anonymous and partially sequestered due to credible fears of witness intimidation. Prosecutors estimated the cartel's trafficking activity generated enough revenue that if it were a single company, it would have ranked among the world's largest corporations by illicit revenue. His 2015 tunnel escape reportedly cost his organization well over $1 million to construct. And despite his conviction, U.S. officials have been clear that the Sinaloa Cartel itself did not collapse with him. Leadership shifted, in part to his sons and former partners, illustrating a pattern seen again and again in organized crime. Removing the leader rarely removes the organization. Guzmán's case sits within a much larger pattern in the history of drug trafficking. His capture and trial pushed U.S. and Mexican authorities toward greater cooperation on extradition and intelligence sharing, but it also exposed, in painstaking courtroom detail, how deeply corruption had penetrated law enforcement institutions on both sides of the border.
And the vacuum his downfall created wasn't filled with peace. It fueled fragmentation, and in some regions, escalating violence between rival factions and rival cartels competing for the routes he once controlled. In the end, the story of El Chapo isn't really a story about tunnels or escapes or Forbes rankings.
It's the story of a boy from a mountain village who built one of the most far-reaching criminal enterprises in modern history, and who, after evading capture for decades, was ultimately brought down not by force, but by the same network of loyalty and fear he had spent his life building, once enough of the people inside it decided it was safer to talk than to stay silent.
Do you think this could have ended any other way? Let us know in the comments. If you found this story as unbelievable as we did, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the true stories behind the headlines.